Hi everyone, I'm Bubbles from Susan's family. Today, I'll teach you how to make a Nordic aesthetic series, Snowfield cardigan. This sweater is made up of several parts: the hem, the body, the chest, the sleeves, the collar, and the front band. We'll start by knitting the hem and the sections above it from bottom to top. Once that's done, we'll pick up strands to knit the collar and the front band. The sweater comes in two sizes. The knit method is roughly the same for both sizes, but the stitch count and row count will differ. The tutorial will demonstrate the smaller size. It's important to note that everyone's tension is different, so the size of the fabric piece can vary. Before starting the actual project, you can knit a gauge sample to measure your tension. There's a separate video that explains how to knit a gauge sample. After measuring it, follow the instructions in the video to adjust your tension before you start knitting. Now, let's take a look at the pattern chart. Each square in the chart represents one stitch, which corresponds to one loop when you're knitting. Different colored squares represent different colors of yarn. Here, the blank squares represent knit stitches. A horizontal line represents a purl stitch. This part indicates the foundation method and the number of starting chains. When counting the number of stitches in each row, count the number of squares. Then match this with the number of loops on your knitting needle. Arrows indicate the direction of knitting. The right side is always read from right to left in the chart. The wrong side is read from left to right in the chart. Pay attention to the fact that the wrong side requires you to work the opposite stitches as shown in the chart. That's the basic introduction to reading the pattern chart. The final chart should be based on the one you have in hand. Let's start by learning how to knit the hem. Use the alternate between knit and purl stitches method for the foundation. After completing the foundation, alternate between 2 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches. This will create a 2x2 ribbing texture. Below, I'll show you how to work the 2x2 ribbing after using the alternate between knit and purl stitches method for the foundation. First, learn the technique, and then follow the chart to knit. Refer to the pattern chart while working. Start with 1 purl stitch, then 1 knit stitch, alternating. Make a slip knot with the yarn. Leave a long tail at the beginning, to make it easier to weave in the ends later. Hold the circular needle with your left hand. A circular needle has 2 points. You can use either end for knitting. Insert the needle into the loop and slightly tighten. This is the first stitch. This stitch will be a purl stitch. Hold the other end of the knitting needle with your right hand as if you were holding a pen. Then, take the end of the yarn around your little finger. Gently pinch the yarn with your ring finger and middle finger. Place the yarn between your index finger and middle finger. This is the proper posture for knitting. Next, place the right knitting needle above the yarn. Insert it downwards into the loop on the left knitting needle. Use your right index finger to guide the yarn. Yarn over. Pick up the yarn. Slip it onto the left knitting needle. Don't pull the yarn too tight, otherwise, it will be difficult to pick up the stitches later. This is the second stitch. This stitch will be a knit stitch. You can see the yarn is below. Start the beginning stitch for the purl stitch. Place the right knitting needle underneath the yarn. Thread from below upwards through the space between these 2 loops. Pay attention to the middle position of the loops. Do not thread through the loops. Yarn over. Pick up the yarn. Slip it onto the left knitting needle. This is the third stitch. This stitch will be a purl stitch. You can see the yarn is above. Continue with the beginning stitch for the knit stitch. Place the right knitting needle above the yarn. Insert the needle. Yarn over. Pick out. This is the fourth stitch. Start the beginning stitch for another purl stitch. Place the right knitting needle below the yarn. Insert the needle. Yarn over. Pick out. This is the fifth stitch. The beginning stitch is done by alternating one purl stitch, one knit stitch, and continuing down the row. If the yarn tail is above, start with a knit stitch. If the yarn tail is below, start with a purl stitch. Continue down to the required number of stitches. After casting on the required number of stitches, the beginning stitch is complete. In my small sample, the number of stitches is fewer, when the actual number of starting stitches is more. Please pay attention to checking the number of stitches. Next, work row 1. The first stitch in the chart is a knit symbol, which corresponds to knitting a knit stitch. The yarn is below the needle. Insert the right straight needle from top to bottom, into the first loop on the left straight needle. Pay attention to inserting into the loop, not between the loops. Then, with your right hand, bring the yarn, and yarn over. Pick up the yarn, and release the loop on the left straight needle. That completes one knit stitch. After you finish, there will be a braid-like texture below. This is the texture of a knit stitch. Continue downward. The second stitch is still a knit symbol, corresponding to knitting one knit stitch. At this point, the loop is at the back, which is the loop for a purl stitch. There is also a strand of yarn above the current loop. The next loop is in front, which is the loop for a knit stitch. So we need to swap the positions of these two loops. Use your right hand to pinch the bottom of the two loops on the left straight needle. Then release these two loops from the left straight needle. First, bring the purl loop back onto the left straight needle from the back. Then, bring the knit loop back onto the left straight needle from the front. Now the two loops have swapped positions. Here, the knit loop is in the front. After that, knit one stitch. Insert. Yarn over and draw through. Release the loop. Complete the knit stitch. The next two stitches are purl symbols. Match and knit two purl stitches. Here, you have two consecutive purl loops. You can knit them directly. Bring the yarn to the top of the needle. Insert the right straight needle from the bottom up into the loop on the left straight needle. Yarn over. Draw through. Release the loop on the left straight needle. Complete one purl stitch. There is a texture with a strand of yarn running above the loops. It's the purl texture. Continue. Keep the yarn on top of the needle. Insert into the loop. Yarn over and draw through. Release the loop. Another purl stitch is done. The next 2 stitches are knit symbols. First, knit 1 stitch normally. Pay attention when switching from purl to knit. Bring the yarn down. Match the knitting. After completing, switch the positions of the next 2 loops. The knit loop should be in front. You can use a straight needle to help with the switch. First, move the 2 loops to the right needle. Then, pick up the first loop from behind with the left needle. Release the loop. Pick up the second loop with the right needle. Move it to the left needle. The loops are now switched. Then knit 1 stitch, followed by 2 purl stitches. Continue with 2 knit stitches, 2 purl stitches, alternating. During the knitting process, pay attention to switching the positions of the knit and purl loops. Ensure you knit into the knit loops. And purl into the purl loops. Repeat this process until all remaining stitches are completed. After completing the last stitch, gently pull tight the starting tail. Now the first row is done. This row is the right side of the piece. The starting tail is on the left side. Next, start the second row. We will work this row on the wrong side. You need to knit the stitches opposite to the chart. First, turn the work. The chart starts with 2 knit stitch symbols. If the chart shows a purl stitch, then knit 2 purl stitches. The next 2 stitches are purl stitch symbols. If the chart shows a knit stitch, then knit 2 knit stitches. Besides referring to the chart, you can also follow the texture. When you see a purl texture, knit a purl stitch. When you see a knit texture, then knit a knit stitch. For this row, continue to alternate 2 purl stitches and 2 knit stitches. Finish this row. Complete the last stitch. The second row is done. For the remaining rows, you will be knitting 2 times 2 ribbing. Each row alternates 2 knit stitches and 2 purl stitches. Refer to the chart or the texture for the order of knit and purl stitches. Pay attention that odd-numbered rows are worked on the right side. Just knit the stitches according to the chart. Even-numbered rows are worked on the wrong side. You need to knit the opposite stitches as shown in the chart. This is how you knit 2 times 2 ribbing. That's it for the hem. Next, let's learn how to knit the body. Continue knitting back and forth from the hem. For the first 2 rows, you need to join a new yarn. After completing the first row, you can break the yarn. Join a new yarn to knit the second row. You will continue knitting back and forth to create the intarsia pattern. Different colored squares represent different color schemes. I'll now show you the methods for joining yarn and knitting intarsia. Here, I'm using a small sample to demonstrate. After finishing a row, leave a 10 cm tail and break the yarn. Then, take the corresponding yarn for the next row. There are yarn tails here. You can tie a knot in the yarn tails. Push the knot to the bottom. Then, hang the new yarn, and continue knitting the corresponding stitch. This completes the yarn change. The yarn tails should be woven in on the wrong side, following the texture of the same color. This is the method for changing yarn when there are yarn tails. Now, I'll demonstrate how to change yarn when there are no yarn tails at the joining position. Take the new yarn, make a slip knot, and hang it. Then, use the new yarn to knit the corresponding stitch. Pay attention to keeping the knot on the wrong side as much as possible. If the edge stitch is special, you can also secure the yarn on the wrong side of the edge. Then, hang the new yarn and continue knitting. The yarn tails should also be woven in on the wrong side. This is the method for changing yarn. When you encounter a yarn change position later, you can follow this method. For intarsia knitting, I'll demonstrate using a small sample. Start by knitting 1 row on the right side. Read the chart from right to left. You will need to use 2 colors. The different colored squares in the chart correspond to different colors of yarn. Refer to the chart and use the corresponding colors for knitting. First, join the yarn. We will call the original yarn color 1. The new yarn will be called color 2. Tie the 2 strands of yarn together. Then pull the knot to the base. Whenever you need to join yarn in the future, refer to this demonstration. Then, follow the chart and use the corresponding colors for knitting. Here, I'll demonstrate changing colors on every stitch. I'll start with one knit stitch using color 1. Then, I'll hold both strands of yarn with one hand. Wrap the yarn around your pinky and ring finger. This way, each finger holds one strand of yarn. Continue with one stitch using color 2. Pick up the strand from underneath color 1. After switching colors and completing one stitch, you can see that there is a carried yarn behind. Gently stretch the fabric to make the carried yarn level with the fabric. Don't pull the carried yarn too tight to prevent the fabric from puckering. Continue with one stitch using color 1. Here, note that color 1 comes from above. Pay attention to stretching the fabric. After completing, continue by picking up the strand from below and using color 2 for one stitch. Note: when picking up strands, ensure that the two yarns do not twist together. Each time after switching colors and completing one stitch, gently stretch the fabric. Ensure the fabric is flat. That is, don't pull the carrying yarn too tight. Continue knitting. Color 1 is worked from above. Color 2 is picked up from below. If using only the index finger is inconvenient, you can use the middle finger to pick up color 2. After completing, you can take a look. The carrying yarn for color 1 is all on top. The carrying yarn for color 2 is all underneath. The texture looks nice and the yarn won't get tangled. In practice, you don't have to strictly separate the top and bottom, as long as the right side looks good. This is the case where you switch colors for every stitch. Next, when the same color is used for no more than 4 consecutive stitches, you can follow the demonstration here. the specific number of stitches for each color. Pay attention to following the chart. Don't make any mistakes. If it exceeds 4 stitches, you need to carry the other yarn. Let me demonstrate this. The method for carrying the yarn when knitting 5 consecutive stitches. First, switch colors and knit 3 stitches. Then use your index finger to pick up the other yarn. Pull the yarn through from below. Continue knitting 1 stitch with this yarn. The other yarn has now been carried once. The carried yarn should also be level with the fabric. This ensures the fabric stays flat. Continue knitting 1 more stitch. Like this, the 5 consecutive stitches are now complete. This is the method for carrying the yarn. After each time you carry the yarn, you need to gently stretch the fabric. When carrying the yarn, you always carry it after knitting 3 stitches. I'll demonstrate carrying the yarn again for 7 consecutive stitches. Pay attention each time you pick up the yarn. Make sure the 2 strands don't twist together. Here, pick up the yarn from underneath and knit 3 stitches. Then, from underneath the other strand, pick up this strand and knit 3 more stitches. After each time you carry the yarn, stretch the fabric promptly. Because of the carried yarn, the 2 strands will twist together. When you continue knitting, pay attention to separating them. Continue carrying the yarn and knit 1 more stitch. This completes the 7 consecutive stitches. If there are more consecutive stitches, carry the yarn a few more times. The method is the same as before. You can see that, here, the yarn was carried 2 times. Next, refer to this demonstration, and keep knitting until the second to last stitch of the row. After knitting the second to last stitch, for the final stitch, regardless of the number of intervals, carry color 2 once. This completes the explanation of the right side row. Continue knitting the wrong side row. On the wrong side, always read the chart from left to right. And the chart represents the right side of the fabric, so on the wrong side, we should work a wrong side definition of the symbols. Therefore, this row should all be made in purl stitches. Hold the yarn with your right hand. Place the needle underneath both strands of yarn. Use the corresponding yarn to knit one purl stitch. Pay attention to gently stretching the fabric, ensuring that you don't pull the fabric too tight vertically. Then continue picking up the corresponding yarn and knitting purl stitches as usual. When picking up and knitting, make sure the two strands of yarn do not twist together. When working on the wrong side, after each color change and completing one stitch, make sure to stretch the fabric promptly, ensuring the fabric stays flat. If the consecutive number of stitches does not exceed 4, follow the method shown here for changing colors. If it exceeds 4 stitches, you still need to carry the yarn, using the same method as when working on the right side. Here, I will demonstrate the method for carrying the yarn over 7 consecutive stitches. First, work 3 stitches. Carry the yarn once, then work 3 more stitches. Carry the yarn again, and work 1 stitch. This completes the 7 consecutive stitches, with the yarn carried twice. Next, everyone refer to this demonstration, and follow the chart, continuing to work until the second to last stitch of the row. Pay attention to keeping the layers of the carried yarn consistent with the bottom. One yarn should always be on top, and the other should always be on the bottom. This makes the texture more attractive. When you reach the corresponding position, you can also carry the other yarn when working the last stitch. This completes the explanation for one row on the wrong side. This is the method for working intarsia in flat knitting. With that, we have finished explaining the body section. Next, let's learn how to knit the front pieces. Continuing from the previous yarn tails, start by knitting the right front piece. The left and right sides here are based on how the garment will be worn. When knitting, you need to decrease stitches on one side to form the armhole. This creates the sleeve opening. For the following rows, you need to decrease stitches on both sides. Now, let's show. Here, I'll demonstrate with a solid color swatch. Refer to the pattern. First, work the first row. After completing the first row, work the second row. We will work this row on the wrong side. Start by decreasing stitches. Bind off the required number of stitches. You can count the number of stitches to be bound off from the left. Here, I'll demonstrate by binding off 2 stitches. Mark the stitch. First, knit 2 purl stitches. Then, pick up the previous stitch, and cover the next stitch. This binds off 1 stitch. The loop on the needle is the second stitch. Continue by knitting 1 more purl stitch. Bind off 1 stitch. Now, the 2 stitches are bound off. After binding off the corresponding number of stitches, continue to finish the row. Once done, the second row is completed. Next, everyone continue to follow the chart. And keep knitting until you reach the row where you need to bind off on the right side. After completing that, start the method for binding off on the right side. That means knitting on the right side. Similarly, count out the stitches you need to bind off and mark them. Then knit the stitches to bind them off. The loop on the needle is the last stitch you need to bind off. Bind off this stitch as well. Then continue to follow the chart and finish the row. When you're actually knitting, don't forget to work the intarsia. This is the method for binding off on the right side using knit stitches. Next, everyone continue to follow the chart. Finish the remaining rows of the right front panel. Once everything is complete, bind off the remaining stitches, then leave a tail and fasten off the yarn. Tuck the yarn tail along the texture on the wrong side. That's it for the right front panel. Now let's move on to the back panel. First, join the yarn and bind off the corresponding stitches. After binding off the corresponding stitches, continue working back and forth. When working the back panel, you need to bind off stitches on both sides simultaneously. The method for binding off is the same as for the right front panel. Once the entire piece is complete, bind off all the loops on the straight needle. Pay attention to not forgetting to work the intarsia pattern during the process. After completing it, reattach the yarn and work the left front panel. Now everyone, refer to the chart to complete it. That's it for the front panels. Next, let's learn how to work the sleeves. There are 2 sleeves, and the method is almost the same for both. Each sleeve consists of the cuff edge, the sleeve body, and the sleeve cap. Start by working the cuff edge. The method is almost the same as for the hem. After completing the cuff edge, work the sleeve body. When working the sleeve body, you will also use right increases and left increases. After that, work the sleeve cap. For the sleeve cap, you need to decrease at the sides. The method is almost the same as for the chest piece. Once everything is completed, you need to join the cuff edge to the sleeve body. Use the row-to-row sewing method to attach them together. Below, I'll provide you with the methods for right increases, left increases, and row-to-row sewing. Learn the methods first, then start working. For the right increase, use a knit stitch. Usually, below the loop is a braid. First, pick up the right strand of the braid. Work 1 knit stitch. This is the added stitch. Then, continue to insert the hook into the loop of this stitch. Work another knit stitch. That's how you complete the right increase in a knit stitch. You can see that 2 loops are worked within 1 braid. Let me demonstrate it again. First, pick up the right strand of the braid below and work 1 knit stitch. Then, pick up this loop and work another knit stitch. If there is a horizontal line below the loop, pick up the right side of the horizontal line and work a knit stitch. Then, pick up this loop and work another knit stitch. Let me demonstrate it again. First, pick up the right side of the horizontal line and work 1 knit stitch. Then, pick up this loop and work another knit stitch. That's the method for working a right increase in a knit stitch. Now, let's move on to learning the left increase in a knit stitch. Usually, below the loop is a braid. First, pick up this loop and work 1 knit stitch. Then, find the second braid below the loop. Insert the left needle from left to right into the left side of this braid. Then, work 1 knit stitch. This stitch on the left is the added stitch. That's how you complete a left increase in a knit stitch. Let me demonstrate it again. First, work one knit stitch. Then, use the left needle to pick up the left side of the second braid below. Then, work one more knit stitch. If the loop is below a horizontal line, first, work one knit stitch. Then, you will notice that below the loop is a braid. And below the braid is a horizontal line. Pick up this horizontal line. Then, work one more knit stitch. Let me demonstrate it again. First, work one knit stitch. Then, pick up the horizontal line below the braid. Work one more knit stitch. Later, you might encounter a situation where the two squares corresponding to a right increase stitch are different colors. This indicates that this stitch should be worked with different colors. For the right knit stitch, pick up the yarn. First, work one knit stitch with color 2. Then, work one knit stitch with color 1. This completes the right increase stitch with different colored squares. When you encounter a left increase stitch with two different colored squares later, follow the same method, using the corresponding color yarn to work the stitches. Now, let's learn how to connect rows. We usually use the seamless sewing method. When sewing, pick up the horizontal strands along the edges of the two stitches. Let's start by getting familiar with the fabric piece. First, find the first stitch at the edge. The first edge stitch can have 4 different situations. The first one is a slip stitch. That means picking up along the texture without working the stitch, forming a large braid. The second type is also a slip stitch. But when working the slip stitch, it goes against the texture on the bottom, forming such a knot. The third type is working every row, usually knitting on the right side and purling on the wrong side, forming small braids like this. The fourth type is also working every row, usually knitting on both the right and wrong sides, forming a rib stitch. The first stitch on the left is the second stitch. For example, with this fabric piece, from this side, the second stitch shows the knit texture. And from the other side, the second stitch shows the purl texture. Regardless of whether the second stitch shows the knit texture or the purl texture, you can see that the loops are all facing forward. These loops that are inverted have horizontal bars below them, which are the horizontal strands between two stitches. It's the same on this side as well. This is an inverted loop. And this line is the horizontal strand between two stitches. The edges worked in rib stitch are the same. This is the second stitch. This column is the second stitch. The loops are facing forward. Between these two stitches, there is an inverted loop. This line is the horizontal strand between the two stitches. The edge is worked in slip stitch. Similarly, between these two stitches, there are also horizontal strands. No matter which type, one strand of yarn roughly corresponds to one row. Before sewing, you can hide the yarn tails on the wrong side for a few stitches, and tie a knot to secure them. Here, I won't hide them. Seamless sewing involves alternating between these two fabric pieces and picking up the horizontal strands along the edges of the two stitches and sew them together. Each time, pick up 1-2 strands. Note, if the row counts of the two fabric pieces match, you can sew them together corresponding stitch by stitch. This means that the number of strands picked up each time will be the same. Always insert the hook from the last stitch, where you pulled out the needle. To pick up the horizontal strand. Here, I will pick up one strand each time. After sewing a few stitches, slightly tighten the yarn. If the row counts of the two fabric pieces are different, but you want to sew them together evenly, you can pick up more strands on the side with more rows. For example, overall, you might pick up one strand each time, but on the side with more rows, you can pick up an extra strand at appropriate positions. Pick up 2 strands. Here, the row counts of the two fabric pieces are the same. I will continue to sew them together. This is the method for seamless sewing of rows. After finishing the entire sleeve, sew it to the armhole position. Here, we use the needle to needle and needle to row sewing methods. Pay attention to the last few rows of the sleeve cap. No need to sew. At the same time, align the pattern on the sleeve with the pattern at the armhole. Before sewing, you can use stitch markers to secure it first, and then sew. When securing, the seam on the sleeve should face the underarm. Then secure the rest of the areas with stitch markers. Now, watch the sewing method. Before proceeding with the operation, the needles are in the bound-off state. This is a commonly used seamless sewing method. You can leave a long tail on one of the fabric pieces. Thread the tail through a darning needle. Position it on the back side. Insert the needle from the edge of the fabric piece closest to you, where there is no tail. That is, insert the needle from the middle of the edge stitch. Then insert the needle from the middle of the edge stitch on the other fabric piece. Continue by picking up the reversed braid from the front fabric piece each time. From the back fabric piece, pick up the inverted braid. After sewing a few stitches, you can check and see that the sewing position forms a braid-like texture. If you pull tight, it becomes a seamless seam with no visible stitching. You can decide whether to pull tight based on your preference. I will continue to finish sewing here. This way, it's sewn up. If the stitches are bound off, you need to sew them together with the row. On the stitch side, pick up the braid. On the row side, pick up the horizontal strand. And if the row count is more than the stitch count, adjust accordingly, at the appropriate position. At the same time, pick up 2 horizontal strands. If you don't need to sew out the braid effect, just pull the yarn tight. That's how you finish the sleeve. Next, let's learn the method for knitting the collar. Along the front and back chest pieces and the sleeves, pick up stitches. All along the corresponding positions, pick up the stitches from the braid that was tacked down. Pick up the corresponding number of stitches. Refer to the chart for the specific stitch count. After picking up the stitches, work 2 by 2 ribbing across the middle as well as the sides. Now, everyone can complete this part on their own. That's how you finish the collar. Finally, let's learn how to knit the front bands. There are the left and right front bands. The method is almost the same for both. First, pick up stitches. Then, work 2 by 2 ribbing. For the right front band, you need to leave buttonholes. The left front band is knitted normally. No buttonholes are needed. Next, watch the video. Then, follow the chart to knit. When picking up stitches, pay attention. Avoid creating large holes. Pick up stitches in the spaces between the 2 edge stitches. Refer to the chart for the specific picking up pattern. You can also adjust based on the actual situation. Ensure the fabric piece is flat and neat after picking up. Aim to pick up the corresponding number of stitches evenly. The buttonholes occupy 2 rows. On the first row, work on the right side. Start with the corresponding amount of 2 by 2 ribbing. My sample has reached this point. Then, work 2 decrease stitches. Pay attention when working the second decrease stitch. First, work the corresponding stitch on the left side. Then, complete the decrease stitch. Next, starting from the second stitch on the left side, continue working the 2x2 ribbing pattern. At the buttonhole position, work a decrease stitch. Continue until just before the next decrease stitch position on the next row. Now we are at this point. Work 2 whip stitch increases. Place your index finger above the yarn. Turn clockwise to form a crossing loop. Pull this loop up and over the right needle. This completes 1 whip stitch increase. Work another whip stitch increase. Then, continue working the 2x2 ribbing pattern according to the texture. Move down. When you reach the previous row's decrease stitch position, work 2 whip stitch increases. For the rest of the positions, work the 2x2 ribbing pattern. Finish the corresponding position of the front band. After completing everything, you need to bind off with single knit. Please watch the demonstration. Single knit bind off. This means moving the right needle. Let's switch the yarn position. Usually, after finishing the single ribbing, you can use this binding off method. Here, I have a small single ribbing swatch. First, work 2 stitches with the opposite texture from below. The first stitch below this small swatch is a chain. The second stitch below is a horizontal bar. So, start with 1 purl stitch. Then work 1 knit stitch. Then, cover the first stitch with the second stitch. And slip it off. This will bind off 1 stitch. Continue working 1 stitch with the opposite texture from below. Here, it's a chain. So you should work 1 purl stitch. Before you do that, pinch the bottom of the loop on the right needle with your left hand. Take the needle out. Place it underneath the yarn, and reinsert it back into the loop. Then, work the purl stitch. Then, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This will bind off another stitch. Continue working 1 stitch with the opposite texture from below. Here, it's a horizontal bar, so you should work 1 knit stitch. Before you do that, take the needle out. Place it above the yarn, and reinsert it back into the loop. Work 1 knit stitch. Then, pass the first stitch over the second stitch. This will bind off another stitch. Each time, you need to work a stitch with the opposite texture from below. And before you do that, you need to change the position of the yarn by moving the right needle. When working a purl stitch, the yarn is above. When working a knit stitch, the yarn is below. Let's continue binding them off. When there's only 1 loop left, secure and weave in the end. This is the method for single rib bind off. Up to this point, the sewing technique for the front band is complete. Finally, sew on the buttons. Attach the buttons to the right front band. Align the left and right front bands. Sew the buttons at the corresponding positions of the buttonholes. The sewing method is not fixed. Just make sure they are securely sewn on. Now, everyone can finish it on their own. Up to this point, the knitting method for this cardigan has been fully explained. If you have any unclear points during the knitting process, don't hesitate to join our Facebook group for supports. Susan's family. Support your handwork experience. Enjoy the joy of life. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode.